Hey, online students, I want to give you some feedback on your reading response 3 and give you some tips for essay 3. So, reading response 3, everybody be checking MLA format. Be checking MLA format. So you might want to find an example or just go back in your eLearn to an earlier module and find what MLA format's supposed to look like. So I'm seeing a lot of missing last name and page number in the upper right corner. I'm seeing spacing issues. It should be double spaced throughout with no extra gaps of space anywhere, no blank lines. I'm seeing essay titles bolded or in quotation marks. It should just be plain. I'm also noticing a lot of you are putting novel titles in quotation marks. Novel titles are always going to go in italics because it's a long work. Short works like poems and short stories go in quotation marks. So please make note of that. Check your in-text citations. It should always just be author's last name and page number. No commas, no abbreviations for page, just name and number. If you've already mentioned that author's name in that exact sentence, then just a number is fine. Make sure that you space out between the last word of the sentence, put a space, then put your in-text citation in parentheses with a period after that citation. You just need one period at the end of that, not at the end of the quote, and then also at the end of the sentence, and then also at the end of the parentheses, just at the end of the parentheses. Check your works cited pages. Don't space out your entries. Put them back to back. Use hanging indent. As I'm saying these things, if there are things that you're not understanding, like the spacing issues or hanging indent, go back to your eLearn. But also, guys, just Google it. Google how to do hanging indent. Google will pretty much tell you everything you want to know. So yeah, check your works cited. Check that you've got the right information. Check that you're using hanging indent. Don't space it out. Basic MLA format kind of stuff. Also, make sure that you guys aren't just summarizing. So don't just say, here's what happens in Serena, or here's what happens in the Tilted World. I want your analysis. I'm sorry, guys. I'm looking. This is crazy. This is what happens after you have a baby. Your hair starts to grow back after it falls out and it sticks up. Sorry. What was I saying? Don't just summarize. I want your analysis. So I want to know what about Jesse's actions shows his ambition, or what about Serena's actions showed her ambition. Like when she does this, it shows this, not just Serena does these things. That's just a summary, but an explanation is what I want. Like when Serena does this, it shows blah, blah, blah. As far as your essay, I want to go through both of your prompts so that you can maybe make a good choice for what you want to write about and just kind of explain what I want. So I'm looking up here on my screen. Your first prompt is about the temperance movement of the 1900s, about prohibition, alcohol. The prompt itself says, in an MLA documented essay, explores how Jesse Holliver's character, him specifically, embodies or portrays each of the vices: alcoholism, family violence, and political corruption. So there you go. There's 3 paragraphs. Talk about how Jesse embodies alcoholism. Talk about how Jesse embodies family violence and political corruption. And so in those ways, you're going to be really pointing out instances in the novel where you see his alcoholism. Where do you see family violence? Where do you see political corruption? But also explore, like, how is that reflective of that time period? Which is going to require some research. So the second part of it here says, to provide evidence for your argument, find and cite one scholarly source from the library's databases that discuss the temperance movement or prohibition. Your third source can be another source on these topics or a secondary source. So you need 3 sources for that essay. One of them obviously is just the novel. And then you need 2 other sources. One of them needs to be scholarly. From the library databases, scholarly means written. It's going to be from an academic journal, not a newspaper, not a magazine, not a website, but an academic source that you will find going through the library site and type in the search box. You can type in prohibition or temperance movement, but you want to make sure you're not just finding a magazine article or a newspaper article. You really want a scholarly article there. But your third source can be, it's more open-ended. So what you want to do is really research that time period and the culture of that time period. So you might type in temperance movement and culture, or temperance movement or prohibition all together. That way it'll pull up temperance movement or prohibition, whatever it finds. It'll find either one. Temperance movement or prohibition. If you do an advanced search, you can add another line that says and culture, or and violence, or and what was the other one? Alcoholism, or political corruption, or whatever. So you might have to search several different ways, because every different combination of search terms is going to give you different results. The librarians can help with that. There's a chat with the librarian function if you need help. You can meet with the librarian, the writing center. It's just going to be trial and error finding some sources. So your three main body paragraphs would be alcoholism, family violence, and political corruption, but you might have a paragraph either before that or after that, perhaps, that really explores that time period and what prohibition was, what the temperance movement was, and one of your sources can give you all that background information. But what you really want to make sure you do in that essay would be talk about how does Jesse sort of embody all of those things, right? So don't just summarize, here's where we see Jesse consume alcohol. Here's where we see Jesse being violent. Here's where we see Jesse using political corruption. Every time you point out an instance, tie it back to real historical time period, right? So that you're just sort of showing how Jesse is sort of symbolizing what actually happened. So it's sort of a character analysis right alongside sort of a time period exploration. Okay, your second prompt option says write an MLA documented essay that compares the different families and their dynamics in The Tilted World with those seen in one of the following, either Alice Walker's Everyday Use, Bradbury's The Veldt, or Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants. So you'll have two primary sources, two stories, and then a secondary source, so another source that talks about maybe family dynamics or something. But whatever that secondary source is, don't just pull a source just to have a quote from that source. You're not really going to get a lot of credit for that. You want to find a source that talks about your topic, like family dynamics in one of those stories, and pull a good quote about that topic. So in the family dynamics in Tilted World, you could talk about the family dynamics between Jesse and his wife, Dixie Clay. You could even bring in how there's the extra woman, Jeanette, in that. You could also talk about Dixie Clay and Ingersoll and how they sort of form a family. You can talk about the relationship between Dixie Clay and her child, or her adopted child, I guess, Willie. So yeah, you've got options there for family dynamics, but you want to make sure that whatever other story you choose, you can show the parallels. So I wouldn't talk about the relationship between Dixie Clay and her child Willie, and then like the relationship between the couple in Hills Like White Elephants, because those aren't really the same thing. But if you're going to go parent-child, then The Veldt might be a good choice, because you could compare those, or Everyday Use, because both of those are about like mothers and children, or parents and children. Let's see, if you want to talk about the couples like Ingersoll and Dixie, or Dixie and Jesse, then Hills Like White Elephants might be a better choice, because you could compare and contrast those relationships. But we don't have a married couple in Everyday Use, so that wouldn't make sense. Maybe The Veldt, you could talk about the parenting relationship, or between the man and wife, but I think that that relationship more focuses on parent and child, more so than like husband and wife. So, but you want to find some good sources that talk about specific relationships in those stories. You don't want sources, you don't want to pull quotes from sources that are just about the plot. You really want your quotes that you pull from those secondary sources to be on the topic that you're writing about. That's really important. So, also in this prompt about family dynamics, you're just comparing two stories. I wouldn't bring in three stories, just two, one and another. And so getting your body paragraphs, I would, it might be tempting to do one paragraph on the Tilted World relationships and then another paragraph on your next story and the relationships there. But what I might do actually, because I think it'll give you 3 body paragraphs really nicely or more, is to look at what are the parallels. See if you could find 3 parallels in the relationships, or three things that you could compare and contrast about those relationships, and compare and contrast those 3 things. Like they both something. One way they're different though is in these ways. And so you've got maybe 3 different sort of topics within that, rather than just, here's what the relationship is like in Tilted World, here's what the relationship is like in Hills Like White Elephants. Because then I'm afraid what you're going to end up doing is just summarizing and summarizing. And you're not going to get credit for summarizing. You get credit for analysis, for comparing and explaining and really digging into the topic. So I don't think any one prompt is easier than the other. They both require some research. The second prompt requires more literary research, whereas the first prompt requires more historical research. So it's totally up to you. Like I said, I don't think one is easier than the other. I do suggest that you start with an outline of your paper, though. I find that to be really, really helpful. Just mapping out your thoughts and making sure that it all makes sense before you start writing. So I think your essay is due on, let me see if I can find the due date really quick. I want to say it's let me just look so I don't tell you the wrong date. Essay 3, March 27th. So you've still got 9 days to get that going. I wouldn't wait till the last minute. If you want to submit like an outline first and have me look at that, I'm happy to do that. I'm pretty much caught up now, so I can get back to you a lot more quickly. Hope this video has been helpful. If it brought up new questions, please reach out to me. Let me know what your questions are, and I will be happy to answer and help. Thanks.